Commissioner Coles,
Present.
alternate Commissioner Coviello, alternate Commissioner Caird,
Here.
Commissioner Walewski,
Here.
Commissioner Volpe,
Here.
Commissioner Tedesco, Commissioner Clock,
Here.
Secretary Pago,
Here.
Vice Chair Salka,
Here.
Chair Hammersley.
Members is here. Commissioner Tedesco just walked in. I did hear from alternate Coviello and Ma that neither of them are going to be able to join us tonight. And with that, we do have a quorum. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Could all remain standing for a moment of silent reflection, please. Thank you. Okay. All right, looking for a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting on October 4th, 2022.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion, a second.
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Commissioner discussion, item number 7. Anything anyone has here? I don't think there is, right? Everyone's good? All right, let's move on to item number 8. This is a public hearing. We're looking for a table on item number 8A. Do we have a motion to table?
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Bob. Second?
Second.
Santiago with a second. Any discussion? They're still working on a couple issues here, so I think we'll be ready at the next meeting, but all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 9A, LePage Homes, Inc., subdivision application for a 12-lot subdivision property located at 347, 349, 389 Marianne Avenue. This is zoned in an R2025 I1 zone, S1337. This is continued from our last meeting on 10/4. The applicant is here. I believe he's going to ask for a 65-day extension. Could you just come up, identify yourself, give us your address, and ask for your extension, I guess?
Hi, LePage Homes, 172 Flanders Street, Southington, Connecticut. I'd like to ask for an extension on the application that you have before you for, I believe it was a 65-day, you said?
65, yep.
I'd like to.
Okay. So we have a request for a 65-day extension. Do we have a motion for that?
Mr. Chairman, make a motion that we approve a 65-day extension on S1337.
Okay, we have a second?
Second.
Let's go with a second. Any discussion on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thanks. Now I'm going to look for a table on that item.
Mr. Chairman, make a motion that we table S1337.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Tedesco again, the Solca Tedesco crew. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 9B and 9C, we're looking for tables on both of those. Those are Denorfio applications.
Mr. Chairman, make a motion that we approve a table on SPU 666 and SPR 1844.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? I'll give it to Clock this time. Mix it up a little bit. Good job, Jen.
But we're not playing Jeopardy.
Family Feud, baby.
What is second?
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We're fine to do both of those together, Dave, right?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, moving on to item number 10, affordable housing discussion. This was something that I've been putting out there for you all to think about over the last couple of months. And I'll open it up for discussion in a second. I just want to let you know what my intent is here. This is the first discussion of several, I'm sure, over the coming months. But I didn't want this to sit on the shelf for too long and collect dust. But this will not be the last time that we talk about it, nor do I expect that we will be making any recommendations coming out of tonight's meeting. Rather, what I think it will be is just sort of opening up so people can share their thoughts of things that they think are possibilities of the recommendations, the 24 recommendations that are listed in the plan, and then let everyone sort of think about those for the next couple of weeks, and then we can come back sometime maybe in November when an agenda is a little bit on the light side, and we can take it back up again, and maybe, over the course of time, we'll make some recommendations to whatever we need to do, whether it's recommendations of things that the Planning and Zoning Commission could do, or whether it's recommendations that we would need to pass up to the town council. It's really sort of us on how we want to pursue that, but let's let that sort of organically grow there. But let's open it up for discussion, and just we'll start it off on my left-hand side with Commissioner Wolowski.
I guess I'd like to start by saying, I believe Plan Metrics did a good job with what they were tasked to do. Whether I agree with what they had to do or not is, I guess, I'll follow up on some issues that I have with the whole concept. I think we do a great job as a town with naturally occurring affordable housing. The idea that, on a statewide basis, they're trying to tell us that our affordable housing is inadequate in town, I disagree with. I also disagree on many levels that, let me go back. In order to make it work, we need to have the builders working in conjunction with the plan, and it's not necessarily beneficial or lucrative for the builders to do that. So we're between a rock and a hard place where how do we implement this and yet keep building and development of town moving forward? This particular item and multitudes of others are coming down from Hartford, one party control. It's kind of reminds me of, maybe picking dodgeball teams. You're never gonna win in that when one person or one bully is controlling the entire team that's being put on the field. So, with that said, I'll support the plan as it's written. Can we implement it? I don't know. It doesn't seem realistic to me. As a sidebar, I would ask the commissioner how many towns in the state actually hit the deadline and got their plans put forth. Do you know the answer to that?
Yeah, I believe it was less than half of the 169 towns that were required to put that forth as a
So,
I don't know the.
what I would say is there's Hartford putting another item in front of us that they can't really enforce or choosing not to enforce. So with that, I think I've said my piece.
Okay.
And, I look forward to hearing my fellow commissioners' input.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Anyone else have anything they want to talk about? Peter?
Well, for me, and again, I think they did a nice job. I think there's a lot of things in here I like, whether it's affordable or not. As Steve said, and we're right, and we kind of talked about this. I think we're the last numbers. I'll get the percent wrong, but you could fact check me. 47% are naturally occurring, I want to say. It was something like that. Might be off by a couple percentage. And so we had always talked about not necessarily having to have policy to get more, but how do we convert what we have? Because we already have an inventory there. And so given that inventory, what can we do? Because we can complain all we want. The law is the law. We got to get to 10%. We're at 5. So we're stuck with what we're stuck with. Else, we're going to have 830Gs come before us and have stuff being built where we don't necessarily want it being built. And there's not little we could do with that. So for me, I like what is on, for a starting point, I think in my copy, it's on page 23, which is establish a affordable housing advisory committee. And for me, I like that because it would be focused. It would be, I think, could be people from the community, could be lending agencies, could be real estate, whatever, who would see the housing market for what it is and could advocate for things. Because as we know, we're at the end of the process, not at the beginning. By the time it comes us, a little too late. And so if that could be done, and I noticed they have town council there, about housing trust fund grants, that sort of thing, or advocate for CHFA loans when people come forward. Some of those things, which is also on page 22. I think the council's already kind of looking at mobile home parks with rental fair. I think it's the Fair Rent Commission or something. They're having those discussions anyway. But I think an advisory board that's dedicated just to that and can look at some of these other things, I think would, and it's outside, I'll call it council or this commission, I think that's a fair way to go as far as being able to look at our existing inventory and how to convert those things. Because I don't think anybody, at least I don't, has an appetite to build the thousands of units we would have to in order to get to that number. So for me, at this point, I would not be advocating, at least right now, changing in any regulations. Because I think our regulations do indeed promote a variety of things, hence the number's 47, and that we're already looking at our regulations anyway, so why upset the apple cart at this time to go do it? I would think if we have any regulation changes, they should come at the end of our regulation review. Then we could go do that. But I think establishing or recommending a affordable housing advisory committee who could take up some of the other things that say town council or town, I don't see an issue with that because, like it or not, 10% is 10%, and we're at 5. But we're at the advantageous stage of having an inventory which can be converted. And so for me, that's kind of where I am on it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Anyone else?
If I can add, because I've advocated for the
Commissioner Carey, go ahead.
yes. Along with that, that would go with the trust fund, right? Because with the ability to apply for grants, seek donors, that offsets the cost of build, which we've heard from our developers is an issue. And in turn, some of these newer developments could potentially have diversity in size, structure, cost, offset by that trust, right? So I'm with you.
Could I ask you to clarify that phrase, diversity in structure? What does that mean?
Size of home, square footage, and therefore ability to sell the homes at different price points. I didn't need to say size and structure. I could have just stuck with size.
Well, you said structure. I just wasn't sure what you meant.
Yeah.
By it, so that's why I asked you the question.
Igloo, yurt. No,
I think it's
Coulda
referred
just
to
stuck
as
with
like middle
size.
housing.
yeah.
It's referred to as middle housing.
Some of it is, yeah. Some of it is. I mean, ADUs were a part of this as well. I think it was something that a move to increase the amount of affordable housing in municipalities was to allow for ADUs by right, which we took up last year.
No.
But I don't want to go off on a tangent. But I will say this, and I'm not trying to interject or diffuse anyone from talking about it, but the Fair Rent Commission is separate from this, right? So,
Yes.
so just to clarify, the need to establish a Fair Rent Commission is dictated by state statute, and that's the responsibility of the chief legislative body of
Yes.
each town. So the town council is dealing with that right now. That's not something that sits before us, nor do we necessarily even have a role to play there.
Absolutely.
At least right now. And I don't think that they've done anything, but I just don't, I just am making sure that everything is framed correctly. But Commissioner Kier, go ahead. I don't want to cut you off.
No, square footage was the appropriate term that I was looking for. I didn't need any more words, but the trust itself was, as it was originally posed to us, was a method of having funds available to developers should they want to apply for them to offset their building costs, to be able to provide a variety of housing. So that could go along with the
Okay.
with the coalition.
Okay. Cat for now?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Anybody
Chair.
else?
Table it.
I see them. I'm looking to my left too. I got people on my left as well. So, Commissioner Coles, you got something?
Oh yeah. So the hill that I continue to try to climb up on is listed in chapter 4, subsection 2, when we kind of talk about what you guys have already spoken on, what we have already in our town. We have a pretty robust market or housing structure that we can create as affordable, but it's not under the definition. So as I've said before, and I try to spend some time looking at this, but also looking at 830G and the language in that and see what options we have to try to thread the needle, as it were, to try to acquire what we have built in the town. So the language does exist in 830G. There's some model language also that shows that you can have deed restricted housing, or, you know, and as you've heard me talk about this before, a deed restricted unit in a building, or the whole building to that issue. So for instance, if you have a 1 or a 3 family, we'll say a 3 family house, and you wanted to make one of those units affordable, you would enter into a deed. And I do recall that there was some concern that we're going to be stuck with this for a long time. And I think, Bob, you had said that, and I heard that, and I thought about it. And how do we satisfy that anxiety for having something for 40 years? And I mentioned this before, and I'm going to come back to it. And I looked at our tax section 357 of our town ordinances. We have a lot of tax abatements already. And it's some pretty diverse stuff for motor vehicles, for veterans, for seniors, for solar energy. But this is an opportunity to use our tax code to try to support, or at least incentivize, individuals who have several units to play with, so to speak, to say, hey, listen, if you can cover my cost by deferring my taxes so that my net expenditure is going to be flat. So we're going to make this affordable. I have to charge lower rents. However, by charging lower rents, the town is going to incentivize me by helping me out with my property taxes. And so I'm trying to think out of the box, and how do we get to those units that we have in town? And, you know, I'm not a tax guy. I'm not a finance guy. I'm a biologist, for crying out loud. It doesn't really equate too much, but I just see this as a resource that we have, and I'll come back to this again, but I don't have the depth and scope of the finance piece to really put it all together, and the tax piece to put it all together. But excuse me, I do think that it's an opportunity that we have. If we look at a swap thing, and we're looking at what we have and what our strengths and weaknesses are. The strengths are what we have built in. So I don't want to ramble on, but that's where I keep coming back to, and I try to learn more about it every time I come back and we have this conversation. And, you know, with whatever feedback you give me again, I'll dig into it again and throw the best jabs that you can, because that's the only way that we'll be able to shake the tree a little bit and find the things that are wrong with the ideas that I'm coming up with, so that finally, after all the things that we've done, we'll finally hopefully come out with a good product.
Okay. Thanks, Caleb. Commissioner Tedesco.
Yeah, and I think where the opportunity lies is the tax abatements, because I was, you know, that was my, you know, what I would suggest, and it was a good point you brought up there. And I think further, it would be good to incentivize new units going in, or that go beyond the required component of affordable housing in order to be in compliance with state. Not just a flat sort of like, you, for doing what you need to do, a sort of rate of tax abatement just because you're creating affordable housing units, but to go beyond what the state is requiring. I think that's something that really motivates really motivates folks to help us pursue the threshold that the state has set, and will actually help us get there someday. And yeah, I think beyond that, has anyone compiled the numbers and gone into if things like mobile homes were classified as affordable housing, where we would be as a real number of what our affordable housing is? Because I haven't seen anything on it, and I'd love it to be made available to me so I can have a better understanding of affordable housing in Southington that isn't currently being classified as affordable housing.
Yeah.
Okay, so just before I get to you, Christina, and I see some other people walking into the room. just so you know, no applications are being taken up tonight. We're just talking about the affordable housing plan. So if you're here for an application, you're going to have to come back in 2 weeks. A notice was posted on the website about that yesterday afternoon. So you're welcome to sit and listen to us pontificate on affordable housing, but you may not do that. So I just want to let you know. We're talking about affordable housing. We adopted affordable housing plan earlier this year. We're talking about that plan, and it's just an internal public discussion amongst commissioners about the plan and certain recommendations that are in there. It's not about anywhere in specific at this point. So, yes. Okay. Thanks. So, Nick, you asked about mobile homes. Roughly, I think we have about 550, I want to say somewhere in that neighborhood, 550 mobile homes in Southington. None of those mobile homes count towards the number of affordable housing with the state. And we are currently at 5.34%. We have 932 recognized affordable housing units in our town of the 17,447 at last census. So if you add that 500 or 550 to the 900, you come up somewhere in the neighborhood, I want to say like 8 or 9%. The magic percentage is 10% being the magic number. So just to give you an idea of what that is, the plan actually talks about mobile homes under the natural occurring as one of the natural occurring affordable housing components. And there's reasons why mobile homes aren't counted. I won't necessarily get into those right now, but they aren't anywhere.
Oh, yeah, I'm well aware.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to see where, if they were considered, not in a perfect world, but
Yeah.
with advocacy from planning and zoning commissioners and the public alike, and so on and so forth. If we get there, what are we then trying to achieve beyond that?
It would make a significant dent in our number,
Yep.
which I would love to see, but
Yeah.
that's me anyways. Okay. Any other members? Christina, sorry.
No, it's okay. I was kind of going to piggyback off of that, the purpose of this, outside of whatever the agenda Hartford has here that has been spoken about, is to take this kind of quantitative look at where we're at. And I think this document does a really good job of that. And also, like, for if and when it goes before the public, it's very readable. That's something we've all been discussing here a lot. And I do think that there's some revealing things outside of what we've discussed about the different ways that we can approach this community involvement. I really do like that on page 22, there is a note about the 63 units occupied by persons in households receiving tenant rental assistance and 354 units. Now, I don't know if we, take out that 500 plus that we were just talking about with mobile homes. This idea of the affordable housing appeals list appeals to me in that sense that we are just showing that we do have those other things, because I've hearkened a lot about how I do want to see that diversity. And when I say diversity, I do mean affordability in that sense for, like he says on page whatever one here, page 18, section 3, seek to provide a variety of housing choices in Southington for people and households of all ages, incomes, and characteristics. So when we're looking at that, this document is going to act as a way for us to see how we can go forward to achieve the goal that ultimately we're here to serve what we think is appropriate for Southington, right? So take out all of the sort of animosity we may have for why we're here. I do think it's important in the end that we have the information and that we do take some of the advice that it has, such as the different community-driven things, but also that appeals be something that we want to look into, because it does seem like we have some of the meat in that sandwich, so to say.
All right. Now you're making me hungry.
Metaphor. Me too.
Thank
you, Mr.
I like
Chair.
that.
Thanks, Christina. Jen.
I'm just taking notes. Okay, so my review of our plan, and I don't think I have to give Planometrics any more support. I think they've done a fabulous job on this and our POCD, but it outlined, basically we have a couple charges. First, it's we need to meet the 10% state requirement. And how do we do that? And there's some ways that that are suggested in here. And second, to me, which is not really said, but I think we should actively work on, promote the naturally occurring or perceived affordable housing. I predict in the next POCD, we will 100% be talking about housing. What type of housing? Because we focused on, based on data, the community was aging, and therefore we needed to provide housing for an aging population. Well, I think we're going to hear a lot about a younger population and what we're providing for that population. So I think that's going to steer the focus, and it's identified in here as middle housing. So that's one piece that we as a board may want to focus on in preparation. I like Peter's idea of what is suggested in the plan, which is the committee, very similar to the POCD. And in my opinion, the only way to carry out some of these suggestions is to coordinate and be organized and focused. Some of the suggestions are regulation centric, so that would be our body, but there's a whole that there's no one that can oversee certain types of things like funding. Who's paying attention to the 40 years? Is someone paying attention to that? I don't know. And what happens? We don't know. So we may be going in this circle and no one knows how much we're losing every year and how much we're gaining or whatever. So I think, and I don't know if this is possible, we need to meet with the housing authority. One of the suggestions in here is, what is the housing authority doing? Is there funding? Are there grants to create more affordable housing under their purview, which does count, which will count towards the 10%. I think that's a meeting, that's a necessary meeting. And to understand what their purview is, maybe they're paying attention to these numbers, I don't know. So that's a critical meeting, I think, that should probably come out of this. And Peter made a comment, actually, that we're at the end of the process, which is true, but also we're at the beginning, because every single one of us has the ability to create regulation. It's not done often, but we all have that ability. So I think in reviewing this, let's think about the things that we want to focus on for the future with that capability.
Yeah, thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
Yeah. I like the suggestion that Commissioner Cole was talking about, was taking a look at, but that goes back to the committee itself, making sure that we're staffing it correctly so we get all of the input that we need in order to meet some of these guidelines. When you talk about a 40-year abatement, that's something that when you talk tax abatement, you're typically talking tax abatement for a specific building or a specific enterprise, and you know it's a 5-year, 10-year tax abatement. We're talking 40 years, number one. And number two is we don't know what the magnitude of that could be. If, let's say, that we talk that that's a possibility, and the town would then manage that somehow, we don't even know what the cost of that would be. If we end up with 400 residents coming forward and saying, or 500 that's got multi-family housing and I want to participate, we don't know what the total tax impact's going to be. And we're talking 40 years, which could be very, very significant. So I like the idea of the committee getting the right people, and I think that's really the way to step forward. I agree with a number of the comments that were made, but I think that's really the next step if we're really going to move forward on this thing, because we're not going to change anybody's mind in Hartford about mobile homes and that. That's just not going to happen, at least not in the near future. So, I think that's really the way forward on this right now.
Okay, thanks, Bob. So couple of things that I looked at, and just recalling the public hearings that we held on this, there was the idea, and I think it's included in here, on allowing for rental units to occur in the downtown area above the businesses that are down there. And some of those units are vacant right now, and does it make sense to open those up with the qualifier being that if you rent them out, they have to come in under the definition of what the state considers to be affordable housing. So it's a plus plus. The landlord is getting a rental. You're putting individuals in an area which I think is vibrant already and primed for more vibrancy, even with the young professionals. And we're allowing to get credit for those affordable units in that area. So that's something I think, personally myself, I could support as I learn more and more about it. But I don't know everything, and maybe I'm missing something, so I don't want to 100% commit. But for me, I think that's something that, is kind of low-hanging fruit that's out there that we can possibly look at moving forward. There are other, naturally occurring affordable housing. I've said my piece on that. I'm not going to bore you all again with that one. And Peter and, virtually everybody here has said something about it. So I agree with y'all on that. Mobile homes especially, I think, again, is low-hanging fruit, but there's complications there, I'm told, as well. And I don't think that the state does it right. And I think that, frankly, the state does a very bad job with their affordable housing requirements. I don't think that they know what they're talking about. And, say that bluntly because I don't know any other way to say it. And that's my personality anyway. So the other thing, and Jen, you brought up something about, I think it was you who brought up something about managing the affordable units that we have right now. And there's a specific recommendation on page 21, which talks exactly about that, was setting up a standardized procedure that allows for the oversight of deed restricted units. And that could be done by a qualified administrator, whether it's a third-party administrator or whether it's town staff or some other component, that could be done, to make sure that we're keeping track of what we have for affordable housing as those 40-year deed restrictions come to the 40th year. What's happening with them? Are they falling off the list? Are they coming back onto the list? What can we do to sort of, keep them there so we're not losing ground while we're trying to make up ground at the same time? And I think that's a good idea. Again, to be rather blunt about it, I do not support an affordable housing commission. I think that putting unelected individuals in that position is ripe for problems. I actually look at this commission of the elected representatives on this commission as that being one of our primary responsibilities, is to look at affordable housing and to come up with a plan of how do we want to address affordable housing moving forward. We are answerable to the electorate every 4 years, and if we were to step outside the lines of what the public wants us to do or agrees with us, or we're unable to explain it, well, shame on us, and we'll pay the price for that, frankly. And I as one of those people, I'm happy to go out there and explain why I think certain pieces of our affordable housing plan work and certain pieces of it don't work. But I don't want to give it, again, me as one commissioner out of 7, right? I don't want to give it to some other party to deliberate, come back to us and tell us what they think should be done. And what's to say that we don't agree with what they're saying for whatever reason, and then what kind of situation are we in? Now you're at loggerheads with each other, and that to me is just a potential problem. And again, I think addressing housing, not even necessarily just affordable housing, addressing housing is a primary policy or goal or responsibility of this commission, this body right here. We don't need to give it to somebody else to go out there in some fashion, unelected body, appointed by who? Do I get an appointment? Does Bob Salka get an appointment? I mean, who appoints these people, and what's the composition of them? And did you do that right? Or did you do that wrong? I mean, you got to answer all these questions before you even get there. I'm not there. I just am not. Obviously a Republican. I do not like bureaucracy. I do not trust bureaucracy. No offense. And again, I'm not talking about the town staff. I'm just talking about giving it to another layer of people to sort of wring their hands about what they want to do. And so, I think that the best way for us to represent people is to be representative of the people. And again, we do that here. So I don't support that. To tax abatements, I mean, sure, there's stuff there. I think that there could be encouragements or different, looking at a carrot and a stick, different ways to use the carrot to say, how do we promote people so that they want to come up? Because Peter's right, and we all know it, that it's really up to the private developers on whether they want to come in and develop. I mean, aside from the housing authority, who else is out there developing properties? And how do we incentivize them? One of the ways that we've done it, and I've used this example, so I'll just mention it and not say too much more about it, is our art zone. We do that. We require a set aside for affordable housing in the art zone, and the trade-off there is they get to have a denser allotment of units. It's similar to the open space regulations, right? Where we have open space development, which allows for greater density, and the trade-off being that the town gets a bigger, more contiguous piece of open space. And that's sort of to me, is sort of a map of how we can do it. Tax abatements, I don't know. I don't know enough about them. I don't want to speak for you, Caleb, but I just don't know enough. I don't know how that would work or whether it would be enough for them. I too am somebody who looks at our zoning map, and what ends up happening, as we've been through a couple times over the last couple of years, people who have been here know this too, is that the developer will come in and say, I want to put a development out here in an R80 zone, and you guys, you have to approve it, is essentially what gets said, right? And our hands are pretty tightly tied as to whether we have to approve it or what we can or cannot do. And we've danced that dance a couple times over the last couple of years. And on each occasion, we've come up having to approve it because they've done that. And in that case, I think that that's a developer who's trying to get a piece of property developed. They've not been able to do that successfully in any other means, and by going 830G, okay. There's an article I read in, if you get a chance to read it, I think it was in Connecticut Magazine, September or August edition, about a battle that the town of New Canaan is going through right now, where they have that exact thing happening, where a developer came in, who happens to be a resident of the town, came in, wanted to develop a piece of property. He was consistently told no, because the town planning and zoning commission didn't want to do it, whatever plans he was putting out there, I don't know. But it's an interesting story. If you get a chance to look at it, I encourage you to do so. If you can't find it, let me know, and I'll find it for you, and I'll send you the link, and you can take a look at it at your leisure if you're interested. But when I look at the zoning map and I say, rather than have a developer come in and say, this is where it's going to go because that's where I want the development to be, could we as a group say, we want to create those zones ourselves? We want to create the workforce housing zones and designate where those are going to be. Are they going to be in the downtown area? Are they going to be in some other area? To me, they should not be in R80 zones. They should not be in R40 zones, because those zones are least accessible to services that young professionals or anybody who's living in that type of housing may need, which is, some type of transportation corridor, whether it's either a commuter bus or something along those lines. They don't have that, whether it's close or proximity to a grocery store, a convenience store, or something like that, where they may not have a vehicle or may prefer not to have a vehicle, and so they have no means to go out and drive to the 6 different stores that I drive through every weekend to do my grocery shopping, because you're trying to find the best deal you can in this environment, in this economy. But I think that to me, that's something that's worth sort of almost doing a Charlotte and saying, let's roll the map out and you tell me where you think is the best place for it to go. We have 3 main corridors in this town, right? Queen Street, West Street, Maryland Waterbury Turnpike are 3 main corridors in town. Can we find an area along those corridors where we can say, hey, this is designated as a workforce development zone? I think we could, and I think that, with some thought and some input from some of our professionals, like our town staff, who do a great job, I think, that, that might be worth looking at as a proactive way of addressing our affordable housing needs. Well, the needs according to the state of Connecticut anyways, because we get back to the natural occurring stuff. I'm not familiar with the appeals list, Christina, but I think that that's worth looking at as well from what how you described it, that, if someone thinks that they should be considered affordable housing, then, I think that there's some way we should set up some procedure to allow them to say, that's what we do. We do that with property tax, right? You have an appeal that you can file with the town, and, there's a body who hears it and decides, right, wrong, maybe middle of the road type of stuff. But I think that's encouraging as well. I don't know if anyone else has anything else to add, but as I said at the beginning, I think that, this is just the start of the conversation amongst us. And I encourage everyone, as I will, to go and take some time and put some more thought to what was said here tonight. Maybe take the plan out again and look at it again, like I will, and, think, are there ways to do it, And there's 24 recommendations that are in there. Specific recommendations to our commission. Doesn't mean that there's only 24 recommendations that people can look at. I don't think, for example, that there's really anything out there about establishing workforce housing zones ourselves in there. So you're not tied to or constrained by those 24 recommendations. You can come up with whatever you want. And I've said it before, and Jen brought it up tonight, and I'll say it again, just as she did. You all have the power to change regulations. All you have to do is write it down on a piece of paper, give it to town staff, and guess what? It's going to come before us. And we're going to hear it, and we're going to do whatever. So if you have an idea and you're not getting any traction from, other ways, you're elected leaders, and, I encourage you all to write up a regulation change you want to see and put it before us. So, Jen.
I have one more comment.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with you on not on wanting not to appoint a separate commission. I do think maybe we should consider, as we would any other project, having people from this commission sit on that committee. Maybe a few people to really focus and go through the 24 suggestions so that it doesn't become a document that is out there and we just are talking about it, nothing's getting it. I would like to see some of those suggestions happen. And I would also like to see what we need to do, because we also didn't talk about a moratorium. No one brought that up, and I don't know what that entails, what you have to prove that you're doing, and if it's something that we would even want to consider. But that's also one of the options, so that for a specific amount of time, we aren't getting bombarded with an R80 830G.
Yeah, and I think the moratorium issue is one that's of interest. I think that when we heard the plan and we're going through our deliberations on that was something that a number of people mentioned. And I think that's a good idea. I think that, Mary Ellen's not here tonight, obviously, but I think that it's worth having possibly town staff to sort of do a briefing to us on what's involved with a moratorium, what we have to do. Is it possible? Is it not possible? What are the odds of us being able to qualify for that moratorium or not? And then, just to put a little bit of reality around it, because I think people hear that and they think, well, we should just apply. I don't believe it's that easy. There are certain things that you have to do in order to qualify for a moratorium. And I think, having somebody enumerate that for us specifically, I think would be helpful for everybody here to see, hey, are we willing to do that? If we're not willing to do it, well, let's just take it off the table. But I think it is something that's worthy of an additional conversation. So thanks for bringing that up. Anything else?
I just had one more thing, and I think we talked about it a while ago, and if anybody recalls it, please refresh my memory. Look, a municipality can make something more stringent than the state code, it's in the state statute, correct?
Yes.
So if someone
Within reason, Caleb.
Within reason.
And I'll use this example, right? We had the development out on Curtis and Lazy Lane. And our regulations require that sidewalks be included in a development like that.
Right.
So there are exclusions where we cannot be more stringent than the state law allows.
So the thought process behind this then was, if 830G requires a certain percent in the application, why don't we just say all of it has to be 830G? You want to come, developer wants to come to town and go to our bucolic countryside in a R80 zone and plop in high density condominiums and have, of those high density units, have 4 or 5 of the 30, which is a net loss. If we're looking at percentages, we're falling farther back with that. And we kind of talked about this when we were talking about the project on West Street. If someone wants to come with us with an 830G, if they have to make it 100%, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If that's what you really want to do, it's now the balance is, I know the economics might not be there then because they can't charge as much. Maybe it's less enticing at that point to make that application. And I don't know if that's a lead in to Mr. Chair, your point, is that excessive? It's extreme, but is it legal? I don't know.
I think it's legal. I'm not a lawyer, but I think that's legal. There is no way that I would ever support that, again, as one of seven, right? I would never support putting that kind of a stringent requirement on developers. But one of the things you brought up that I think that triggered my memory is I had a conversation with somebody in the past couple of months about what percentage of space or land in Southington is actually developable for residential use, right? Under our current, whatever number of acres or square miles we have in town here, what is actually available? It's not open space, not already developed, not, an I zone that's, I don't think you can develop residential in an I zone. But what is actually available out there? And from what I heard, there's not much left that is actually developable for residential. So you have to sort of think about it like, okay, what are we gonna give? And two, the whole density thing, right? It's got to make economic sense for the developer, right? And if it doesn't, they're not going to be, that's where you get that 100%. Right? I can't, unless you're going to give me 700 units, 20-story building on Main Street, I'll do that at 100% affordable, right at the top cost of what is considered affordable. But other than that, it's not going to work for me economically or financially. Even with the arch zone, I mean, even though we have a relatively small requirement on the arch zone, that even becomes a little bit of a challenge for developers from what I've heard from a number of them, that they need a certain number of units to sell at market rate in order to make up for what they're not making on those units, whatever that number is. And I think that was I don't think I was here when that, maybe I was here when that regulation was adopted, but I think that's kind of the idea behind, let's give them more density or greater density than you would typically. But the trade-off is that, one, you're reserving it for 55 and older, addressing the need for elderly population, which a POCD sets out, but two, also the affordable housing component. And we had them in here on the application on West Street, right? That's exactly one of the things that we brought up, right? I think it was Bob Solko who made mention that if we allow you to build all these units and we don't have a certain percentage of them set aside, we're actually taking a step backwards. Mm-hmm. And mathematically, that's a reality, right? So every development that we allow, those numbers add to our stock and reduce, absent affordable housing requirement, reduce our affordable housing percentages.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Steve.
with just to touch on what you just referred to, with what is actually left that's developable. If we use the right number of 10%, can we ever get there? Can we? That's a really good question, right?
Yeah. Well,
If we can't, then without doing something differently, we're never going to get there. And this is just talk, because nothing can change.
I kind of think, I agree exactly with what you're saying. I think we've said this before. I said it at the last meeting we had it. I don't see us ever getting there. This kind of,
isn't it like 900 plus units?
this kind of dictate from Hartford is more meant for these large cities that have hotels that are abandoned, factories that have been abandoned, where you can then give them a tax abatement and you can have them converted into affordable housing units where you get 50, 60, 100 units. Look at the number of units that have been converted in Hartford. They're all old hotels, all factories. There's no new housing being built in Hartford. It's all converted. We don't have that here in town. With all of this work that we have to do, I don't believe we'll ever get there. Now, we could stall this thing for forever. We're trying. We're never going to get to 10%. Reality. I don't see it.
Yeah, I think it's a hard number to.
It's a almost an impossible number to get to.
So again, this is not meant to be the do all and end all on this conversation. It's rather, let's get together for dinner, talk over the dinner table and talk about what we're thinking about. I'll come back in a little while. Well, Christina was going to bring it. Like she mentioned sandwiches. I heard that. I don't know. Comes in, she
7-Eleven
puts
with
that
the
bomb in
chicken.
there and she walks away and she's like, okay, let's
Sunday
all
night
get
in
something
my
to eat after this. But a couple notes that I have here of things that we can have, I could talk to Mary Ellen about trying to get some briefing and some details on. One is on the moratorium that Jen brought up and have them come in and develop sort of a brief presentation on that. You know, again, what does it entail? What's required? Can we do it? What will we have to do type of thing. But the other thing I wrote down was, the percentage of developable land. That's kind of an exercise I think that staff probably can do pretty well. And let us know what that is. And, let's see where it is and let's see where, what is allowed there and what isn't allowed there by our current regulations. And is there a way for us to tweak that? And not to shoot you down with 100%, Caleb. I think you're going to the extreme. I'll assume that for you, but I think that there may be some validity to saying, rather than requiring 20% of a development be set aside for affordable, could we say 30%? Could we say 25%? Heck, as far as I know, the 40-year deed restriction is an arbitrary number. So what's to keep us from pulling an arbitrary number ourselves? 28%. How's that?
But the point is,
we
it's
can
still
put a number in a hat and throw it in there, and
but it still doesn't get us. It's still a step backwards.
Yeah,
Unless it's a 50, a 60-40, we're going to go backwards.
True, Bob. I think you're right, and I think you bring up a good point about is it ever going to be attainable? Maybe not, but I do think that, again, for myself personally, that I have a responsibility as an elected member of this commission to do something.
Sure.
And I'm just trying to figure out what that something is, right? What could we all come to consensus on in terms of what we can do? Because that's the way I'd rather see it go forward, is by consensus. What can we do? And that's kind of what I'm thinking about. I developed I'll share something real quick with you. Maybe this is an exercise for us going, over the next couple of weeks. I developed a spreadsheet, right, of every single recommendation that's in there. It's got call out boxes for, just pull straight from this report. It's not the 50 pages of the report or whatever it is, right? 46 pages of the report. But it's just every recommendation that's in there. I just pulled it, I threw it in a column. This is a recommendation, right? Maybe I send that around and you all look at it and you say, okay, check, I'll approve that. Check, I'll approve that. Or check, yes, no, maybe type of thing, or scale or prioritize list 1 through 10. How do you qualify this? 1 being no way, 10 being absolutely, right? And then have everybody fill out their ballot, and then we sort of see where we are in collecting those and saying, okay, this is kind of where we are with this. And then you focus in on 9s and 10s, the yeses, instead of let's not get distracted by, 5 people saying there's no way in heck I'm ever going to do that. And we try to focus in on that stuff, at least initially. Then we can expand to that other stuff moving forward. Maybe that's helpful. The only thing I'll use the word I worry about, and that probably isn't the right word, is that, of course, all that stuff is FOIable. So, everyone would have to be prepared to know that at the beginning, right? It's not going to be a secret ballot where it's like, okay, what do you propose and what don't you propose? It is going to be FOIable, and probably best case is to send that in through staff. But is that an exercise that people are interested in engaging in, or is that something that people think would not be helpful or useful, or they just don't want to do?
I think it's constructive. If you have to look at how do you approach it, it's a method of which we don't have a method right now.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jen.
I will go one step further and add, maybe we should prioritize, this is mimic what we're doing for the POCD. We're almost exactly doing this. That's part of the implementation table. add prioritization 1 through 10, what we think is the priority, and also add who would own it, what body would own it, who would we have to work with to do it. And then we can take the 5 to 10s and focus on those. Or however, and if we do set up a committee with, a few of us on it, then they have something to work with.
Yeah. Yeah, so, okay. Does anyone, let me ask this question, I guess. Does anyone object to participating in that exercise or not feel comfortable participating in the exercise? And I'll let you in on a hint. If any one person says yes, then we're not going to do it.
I'm cool.
Everyone good?
Everyone likes a good Likert scale.
Huh?
Everyone likes a good Likert scale, 1 to 10.
You guys okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fine.
I don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable. That's why I set the rule that I do. And, I don't want anyone to be in a situation where they feel like they're going to be vulnerable or potentially something is going to happen with what they write down.
I'm okay with it as long as it's not like it ends up being like the make or break or like something that we refer to constantly is like, oh, well, we discussed these things and this is why we shouldn't pursue this or
Yeah.
something like that. I mean,
My intention
having
would,
everything on the table is something constructive to pursue thought and kind of have a plan to work on certain items. I think it's great.
To
but,
guide
like,
these conversations, I
Yeah.
think it's
Yeah.
I think, and I think that my intent is to try to reach that consensus. Like, let's identify, look, we could sit here, I can go through all 24 of them and we can, do it that way. But to take a little bit of a temperature of the commission before we, involve, we've gone for an hour almost now. I don't want to go too much longer, but, let's focus in on those things that we can do as opposed to focusing in on the shotgun approach of everything that's possible out there. And, and I would add, like I said earlier, if there's something that's not on there that you do propose, it's not to say that that's not something worth discussing. It's just, again, to try to find out what the consensus is, take a temperature of the commission. And, and I would go so far as to say, if you don't want to answer the question, don't answer the question then. If you don't want to say yes, no, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or whatever number you want to put there or is possible, then put no number there, But, I think it would be helpful exercise to try to get to that consensus if we just found out where everyone was in the privacy of their own space so that everybody else out in the world can see it, because it is after a while, so.
Mr. Chairman, just a thought. We were talking about a couple of items, the moratorium, try to get some information on that, trying to get some information on how much developable land we have. Would it be worth the exercise of having someone research the tax abatement thing? Just to see, we know how many multifamily houses we have. And if we just took a number and said, okay, let's say that 10% of the land, of the homeowners came forward and said, I'd be willing to participate, what would be the cost impact?
So
Is that something that worth?
I don't think it's not worth pursuing, but what I struggle with is who's going to do it. Because I don't
We have a
think-
finance department, and the same thing you're talking
Yeah.
about going
Yeah,
to.
but now you're involving the Board of Finance, you're involving really the town council decides whether there's going to be abatements or not.
Okay.
And so, I'm trying to limit it to this group for now,
Okay.
but we could, if you want to. I'm happy to,
I'm not talking Board of Finance. I'm talking the finance department,
yeah.
the staff, not the Board of Finance, because they don't have that kind of detail either. Just a thought.
Yeah. Well, what do the rest of the commissioners think about that?
I think getting input from the Board of Finance would be great, but I think to get the actual financial impacts, it has to be someone's day job. So I think we would have to use town finance to even get proper numbers on that. And I've just been kind of writing my thoughts on like how we would propose it. This percentage of property tax would be abated for what portion of affordable housing above 10% up to X percent. Like we'd obviously have to cap it down the line. Getting good numbers on what would be the fair market value of the housing versus under the affordable housing provision. And how do we come up with an incentive relative to the lost income?
And I, as you talk, Nick, I'm thinking, and Dave or Jim, if you have thought on this, I'd appreciate it, but I think we're talking about something that this body really can't propose or institute. Would that be something that the town council would have to?
Yeah, it'd be through the.
It's more their
assessors and
responsibility to
tax
set
department.
tax abatement than it really
Right.
ours. I mean, we could say you should get a tax abatement, but I don't think that we have the ability to say you're going to get a tax abatement.
As a suggestion to deal with something that we face. I mean, enlisting other, other elected bodies in the town, I think, because it is, as Bob says, a hopeless situation. I think we really need to use all of our resources on this to create something that lets us achieve what we need to achieve.
Okay. Could I propose this, if everyone's good with this? Could we get the two things that I mentioned that, from the conversation, further education on moratorium and percentage of developable land that's out there? We'll start with that, but let's come back on the tax abatement piece. I think that it is mentioned in the plan. But I think that maybe we can come back to that at a future date if that's okay with everybody.
That's
I
fine.
think we could have some casual conversations prior to that within.
Yeah. Well, I could
People that we
talk to
happen to
town
know.
staff and try to figure out where that might fall. Bring that up with them and see what they say. We've lost our audience.
All right, we're done.
Okay. Is there anything else for now? So folks, I think, I appreciate everyone coming with their thoughts tonight. Again, I want to do something here. I think doing nothing is really not an option. And so, it's an ongoing conversation. I look forward to us continuing the conversation at our next dining room table discussion, right? Is that what they call it?
Let me know.
The
I'll cook something. I'm a
kitchen
pretty
tables.
good cook. Let me tell you.
Yeah, okay, well, no one's telling you can't do that, Christina. Kitchen table discussion, is that what it's called?
Here you go. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, just
Coffee
a,
table.
just a,
Bob, go ahead.
question on what's coming up on the next week, next meeting. We received a document from a Lawrence Marchek, I guess, with a lot of detail. Apparently, he's a engineer with regards to the one on Meriden Waterbury, Blatchley Avenue. There's a lot of information here, and I just wanted to ask if we could have the town engineers, when they give their talk with Mary Ellen, whether they have really taken a look at this thing. There's a lot of good information here, and I don't know what I'd like to get their feedback on it.
Let's not, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, let's not address that right now, just
Yeah.
because it's not part of
It's
the
not part
hearing.
of the hearing right
We're well aware of it.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
staff has looked at it.
That's why I was
Just respectfully, just to
That-
keep everyone.
good
in
advice, Dave.
where it
Thank
should
you.
be. We are taking a look at it,
Yeah.
and we agree that it's
As
very,
always. So-
Thank you.
So,
Inclusive.
okay. But we do have those two applications will be coming back to us at our next meeting in November. So I predict that both will be ready for action, or at least ready to start. So maybe a little bit long, so get your rest, right? Moving on to item number 11, receipt of new applications. Dave, what do you got?
yeah, that's the zone change down on Meriden Waterbury Turnpike. There was already a zone change there, but it left out a part of the parcel now. This is going to include the rest of it to make it a B zone.
Is this the one by the storage facility? out
It's right on the corner.
So
Yeah.
some of you might remember, that's the one with the Quonset hunts,
Yeah.
right?
So it'll
They
be,
were
a-
proposing a gas station before, and we
Yeah,
approved
right.
it, and the gas station never came, but we approved the zone change,
Yeah.
and the gas station never came back. We had it on our agenda for a while,
Yeah.
Right.
and it never came back because they weren't ready for whatever reason.
So this is that.
Sounds like there might be some activity, but we need to do something else.
the new owner now.
This guy promised me a museum.
Incentivize it a little bit, so.
He had a pretty big take on
Yeah.
that.
Anyways, that's it, Dave? That's all we got right
Yeah.
now? Yeah, okay. Anything else before we ask for a motion to adjourn? From anybody? No? Can we get a motion to adjourn?
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks, folks.
It was 100% would save that.
One of the goals is to be somebody